Probably not, actually. You need to be pretty. My call is going to start in 5 minutes. So I'll basically shout when I need you to stop, okay? That was really quick. Uh-oh. Sounds like there's somebody else on this call. Excellent. Oh, hello. Let's see.
Is my mic working? Because I can't hear you.
Oh, well, that's not good. Let's see. You can't hear me at all. My microphone, basically, it tells me that it's getting a signal. And I can hear yours.
There we go.
All right.
Hi.
Excellent. Hi there. Well, we'll get started in a minute. I think I've got a couple folks who are sort of part of the ESHIP goal organizing team, whatever you want to call us good folks. You know, so, but let's see. So I'm Eric in New Mexico. Where are you coming from today?
Virginia. I think we actually had a chance to talk at the last ESHIP conference.
Okay.
You may have recognized my face when I was briefly like, oh, look, there's a lot of stuff in the background. I'm just going to turn my video off.
Well, I think I recognize the name, but it's some of this is a little bit of a blur. So,
sure.
Oh, and I see ESHIP goals has shown up. That's always a good sign.
I'm slowly getting on. Sorry, it's.
Oh no. Hey, it's 1 o'clock. You're on time.
It's been a lot of calls and emails for all things considered for like a non-work day. Meredith, how are you?
Hello. I realized that I had not actually joined any calls in like a really long time. It's been on my calendar every single week. And we actually have a local entrepreneurship coalition, and we ended up scheduling our meetings at the exact same time.
Oh.
And I was like, you know, it's not really conducive to collaborative culture to skip the coalition meetings to talk about collaborative culture.
It's
Yep.
Absolutely.
So we finally got them rescheduled.
Yes. Well, we're very happy that you joined us today. It's been so normally you have I've had a couple of people ask me about shifting the dates and times, and we've gotten into a cadence. So I don't know that that's something, it would be really challenging. It's, I talk about it on the ESHIP team, like, we have these notions when we're talking about things to do with calls or the ESHIP community and all of that. And I said, when it's 4 of us on a team and you come up with an idea or a notion, and then, you know, I share it with maybe like the ESHIP champions and some of the people on Slack. And then it's like little by little, things start to move, but it's like moving a big ship. You're steering very quickly. And so you're making like this very small turn, but it takes a long time for this ship to kind of move very slowly. And then you're like, oh, nothing's working, or things need to change. And then you shift back, and I'm like, no, wait, the ship is actually moving. So it's hard. It's really hard to, that's a thing to do with collaborative culture, right? Things move slowly, and what is it we say? Things move at the speed of trust. So I'm grateful to all of you who are probably a little more elbows deep in all of the work that we do. So there seems to be a lot more trust and synergy. And then going out and talking to the rest of the world about it, and they're like, what are you talking about? Is this a cult? I don't know, you know. I was at the Communities of the Future convening, and somebody asked me if there was chanting involved. So no chanting. We don't.
There was ritualistic singing.
There was totally ritualistic singing. So glad to see you, Dia. And it might, like I said, it's a holiday weekend, but interesting. So I don't know, Eric, do you have an agenda handy? And we'll just
Oh, great.
throw it into the chat.
Let's see. Did
I take
No. I just wanted to make sure I was
take
not on mute. Yes, I in fact do have an agenda handy, and I will throw it into the chat.
Excellent. All right.
Let's see. All right.
So thinking about, you know, like Andy's favorite popcorn question is literally a popcorn question, right? It's what's your favorite snack? And he likes you to be very specific. But I'm going to take it a step further. I'm in New York City right now, so I've been eating my way up and downtown. And the challenges of doing that is that I'm eating my way up and downtown. But there are specific things that are connected to this town. So I know that when I'm in New York, I have to have pizza. Like, I can't think about pizza from Chicago because it's more like casserole. But I will tell you that, you know, when I land in New York, a New York stay is not complete for me without a slice of pizza. So my popcorn question to all of you is there, and I definitely affiliate certain cities with certain foods. What's a food that you affiliate with a city that if you go and travel to that city, it's a must have? So I will start with, let's see, who doesn't look like they're still eating through their mind? Dia, that's your popcorn question for the day. What's a town and a food that you connect that you have to have?
Oh, I'm a foodie, so this is difficult. I always have this thing I have to do. Well, I think I should just say Ada because I live here. So we have this really, really small, it's just kind of like a drive-through. It's called Whip Dip, and it's a burger joint, and no one will ever know about it unless you just talk to a local, but you just kind of have to go there if you're in Ada.
Okay. So hey, how come we didn't go when I was in Ada?
We have, that's next time.
Okay. All right.
But
and
we did get to go to the
somebody.
We did get to go to the Vintage, right? So that was pretty cool. Okay, I will popcorn Eric.
Let's see. Boy, this is, I mean, Kansas City is barbecue. I think I've been to, and I've ended up for a variety of reasons going to Kansas City fairly often. I think there's only one time that I did not have any barbecue whatsoever. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Meredith.
I keep trying to decide between two different things. One is my hometown, and so I'm from Smithfield, Virginia, and that's known for ham, specifically country ham. And otherwise, Hampton Roads more generally, I would say, is just seafood. So.
Meredith, isn't country ham like slightly saltier, I want to say?
I would say it's more than slightly saltier.
Okay. Be generous. Okay. Yeah.
It's like prosciutto.
Yes, it is. Okay, Hassan, you came in just at the right time as we're doing our popcorn question. The question is, name a food that you affiliate with a certain city and something that you crave and have to have when you're in that city. And it could be your city or some other city.
So there's a food that I crave in just about every city that I travel to, and that is red meat. So I don't know what it is about traveling, but for some reason when I travel, I have to have a burger or a steak. And I'm not like a huge red meat eater, but it's just when I travel. And I think the best steak I've ever had was probably in Chicago. And it was at, I think probably like a really odd place. It was a chain restaurant, Weber's, the company that makes the grills. And I was just craving a steak, and I just was looking for the nearest place that was within walking distance of the hotel, and I wasn't expecting much, but it was actually really good.
All right, that's great. Okay, so now that we're all hungry, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Dia Hassan. I know Eric's talked about what this call and this slight shift is going to. First of all, does anybody have any questions about things that are going on around ESHIP or the goals or any of those things that you want me to address before we dive deep?
Maybe it's a general question, but how is that going as far as how many new folks came on board? I just watched the video maybe a few days ago. So I'm curious how many new folks, and how do you think that's going from your perspective?
I think that the planning of this ESHIP summit has, there's things definitely emerging. So one of the things that's going to happen that we're working on, so I want you to think about who in your community would you bring to the ESHIP summit? Because we're looking at, there's a lot of discussion around delegations and groups. Last time, Herman in Philadelphia just like rallied a bunch of people and said, okay, we're all going to the ESHIP summit, and then brought like a contingent along. And because ecosystem building is a team sport, the recognition is now that we've had a lot more collisions and serendipity with the mayor's conference on entrepreneurship, and the mayor, maybe on a future like Goal 6 call, we should invite Ian, who's a mayor that many of you might have met at ESHIP. He's been at a lot of the ESHIP Mayor's Conference, and he stays for the ESHIP Summit. So he's a mayor who's an entrepreneur and kind of gets it. But when you have all those people in your community that don't quite get it, so very apropos of collaborative culture call, how do you build a collaborative culture with people who aren't, I'm not saying that they're not quite there, but maybe don't view things in quite the same ways. So in order for communities to be able to keep that momentum from coming to the event and learning together and having this shared experience, I think the idea is, hey, think about who in your community you want to bring with you, so that when you go home, you'll be able to work on it together. So, and you spark that creative, collaborative culture. Does that make sense? So the registration for the ESHIP Summit, from what I understand, will be happening towards the end of March. So a little bit more time to start getting people on board, and then working out how we try to engage more people in your communities, so that you're not going back and doing this all alone, because it really is a team sport. So
Cool.
there's that. But from your question, how's it going? It's starting to pick up momentum. So we're gonna just kick it in gear. And I've got a bunch of ESHIP champions who are really chomping at the bit to start bringing that field knowledge out. So so that's all I've got on the ESHIP side so far. Any other questions?
I mean, I
All right.
think that helps. Any other, yeah, anybody else, any questions?
Celia, I would say just a follow-up as to, you mentioned somebody was really successful at rallying up other people from the community. Is there any best practice on how to do that, or what kind of language helps? Because a lot of times we hear that, you know, you are representing us, come back and tell us what's it about. We're already spending the funds on you, or something of that note. So is there anything that could help that?
I think that's a fabulous question, and something that I think we should all work on together, because what works in one community doesn't necessarily work in another. It is very much to your point. Yes, we're funding you to go. You come back and tell us, and you're like, no, but I want you to do this with me, right? We're a team. Maybe it's getting a policymaker to go to the mayor's conference and say, hey, I don't see that part, right? You speak that language and you understand, and there are other people like you. So maybe that's the conversation in saying, can we get a policymaker, and depending on the engagement from your mayor's office. And there's a whole set of who goes and what the messaging is and what you bring back to your community that that we can get you information on. So so it starts there, right? But also you could be part of a wider delegation. Like we could maybe get some of the Oklahoma Venture Advisory people to actually understand what ecosystem building and all of that is.
That would be awesome.
Yes. Well, we have but Dia and I have had many conversations about stuff like this, but yes. So, all right, Eric, your show.
Take it away.
You pitched.
I pitched something.
Right.
Well, I'll just say I actually love that question. I'm kind of excited by just that topic that we were just talking about. And right now, Cecilia's frozen for me, although not everyone is, so I'm not sure if I'm frozen. But let's see. So what I'll do is I will just kind of introduce what a couple of us talked about doing, and to frame it a little bit. And basically that was, you know, we've got some new gold champions coming on board. It's still almost kind of the beginning of a new year. We've got the ESHIP Summit coming up. So it felt useful to have a critical mass, or at least a handful of folks that have been involved with this collaborative culture topic, to really look at what is it we want to accomplish in 2020, and what kinds of things do we think we should, you know, start tackling toward the beginning of the year. So maybe something things that we can get done, etc. Before ESHIP is just one of the ways that I framed it in my head. So I thought it would be useful to kind of read through the description again, but also, you know, talk a little bit about what our priorities are. And the thing that I'll mention, because I'm trying to remember how we did this, but we did something of an exercise like this when the first set of gold champions came together. And it was, you know, what are the big things you think you want to work on? And then it was a little bit of collaboration. There was discussion about, you know, here are a few different priorities, and we did some voting. I'm not prepared to do anything super elaborate today, but it felt like if we got a sense from the folks on the call today about where we think this might go, that at least gives us something of a direction for us to pursue for the next couple of months. So that was kind of the general approach that I was looking at taking. Does that make sense to folks? All right. Let's see. So I'm just gonna, as wonky as it is, I'm just gonna read what's down in down on the dashboard, and then I'll just mention some of the projects, and then the last thing I'll do is I'll mention a couple of the other kind of themes or a couple other thoughts that have come up with this group, and then we'll get input from other folks. So first, strengthen the culture within our field, collaborative culture. And as ecosystem builders, we know that innovation thrives in a culture built on trust, and people plus culture equals everything. Cultural divides, however, are already emerging within our field. These divides begin with concerns about resource scarcity and lead to skepticism and disconnection, preventing us from working together to advance stronger ecosystem building practices. We must see beyond our own ideas, organizations, sectors, and communities. And we need to reach out to support and partner with others who share our dedication to helping entrepreneurs. Together, we can expand the ecosystem building community, foster more trust, create open dialogue, and share resources. These efforts will establish a more collaborative culture throughout the field, and they will help us break down silos, achieve our shared goals, and remove more barriers facing entrepreneurs. There were 3 initiatives that through a process were arrived at and have at different points had some critical mass behind that, and have some older canvases around, but nothing that's on the fresh list. So one is versions of a regional ESHIP summit. I'll get into that, or we can get into that later. It's also been the subject, or at least addressed in a couple of previous calls where we focused on that topic. Field Ambassador Training Program, which I know much less about. And something else that percolates from time to time is training and tools for building collaborative culture. The last thing I'll say as part of the lead up here is, one of the things we've talked about is that some of these goals, some of them work, all of the goals are interrelated. Some of the goals lend themselves to maybe project work that's focused on that specific goal. Sometimes, like for instance, in what I call the data call in goal number 5, basically, some of those data related projects are very specific, and it's something that can be handled within the goal. However, for collaborative culture, it feels like we need like a topic that may not necessarily be collaborative culture that we might be able to assist with. So for instance, some folks have talked about, can we use what we're talking about, or the process of being more collaborative or building more collaborative culture? Can we use that and apply that to a project that maybe another goal is doing? So that's one of the things that I'll kind of use as far as opening it up. But I guess I can ask, what is it, each of you expressed an interest in this goal. What is it that brings you to the table today? And is there something that you think we could achieve within this goal framework?
I mean, I'll chime in as somebody who hasn't attended a whole lot, but I'm still really drawn to the regional ESHIP summit concept. And I mean, even though you wouldn't think that Virginia and Kansas City are, you know, super far apart, it's extremely expensive for us to literally travel there. Like if we fly out of Roanoke, last year, the airfare alone was $800 for me to come. And so it's not so much a case of that we could, you know, reduce or subsidize registration or anything like that, but it's just, it costs a lot of money to go. And so we do have the makings of a coalition in our region, and we are actually talking about doing some sort of a regional entrepreneurship focused summit. And so, you know, if you can't bring the folks to the summit, then you bring the summit to the folks. And so that's still what really draws me to the collaborative culture group. And for that matter, when you bring it at a regional level, you can then customize it to the particularities, shall we say, of a particular of a region. Where, you know, if you're rural, if you're urban, if you're kind of mixed, if you have a university town, all of those things that kind of bring different strengths, weaknesses, and challenges to having a robust ecosystem, then you can address those, and you can, I guess, make a little more progress.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my head is on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I don't remember. Do we? Does any part of the ESHIP summit get broadcast in real time live, or is it only certain segments after the summit is over?
So the Firestarter chats or anybody on stage is usually shared in some fashion on the website, but aside from that,
but that happens after the summit is over,
yeah,
right?
it does. Yeah, we've never live streamed anything. That's an interesting notion. So I wonder what that would be like, and that would be a good question to bring up to the team. You might want to share that in the ESHIP Champion Slack channel, and maybe ping Andy or ping
Sure.
Andy. Andy's in charge of
Yeah,
this
because
summit. That's a really great idea.
yeah, because
But I didn't say that. No, I'm kidding.
no, the Aspen Institute is really good at doing that. So they do that for the Ideas Festival. They do it for some of the stuff that they do out of DC, where it goes out. It's live streamed, so you can either be there in person or you can register in advance. And it's kind of interesting when you have a summit which has a cost associated with it. So you'd have to figure out how that would work.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So, so please do share that. That would be great.
I'm actually thinking, as you mentioned that, and I was, there's the Learning Connection that Virginia Community Capital puts on every year, and they have different kind of hosted locations. And so I don't know if that's in keeping with what you're thinking about as well, but I feel like part of ESHIP is so collaborative that if you're just live streaming it to somebody and they're sitting by themselves in their house or in their office, you end up missing out on a lot of the collaborative culture, not to be, you know, redundant with that. But if you maybe had like satellite locations where people were still coming together, that might mitigate some of that challenge.
Yeah, I think the challenge then becomes that it's those things usually happen in bigger venues and cities, and when you have a community, Dia, how big is Ada?
16,000.
Yeah, so it's, unless you were, I don't know, unless it was like one of those TED Live things where you have a community convening and then watching certain segments and then going together to work on stuff, because part of the magic of the ESHIP Summit is that it's small group collaborations. So I wonder if you can host a virtual summit, do you know, here from the main stage is this event, and then we break off and we'll check back with you in an hour, and each community shares out, and you know, like they do in some places. But that's the logistics of something like that, like the licensing for a TEDx live event is there is licensing costs and stuff like that involved, which, you know, at the end of the day will be less than maybe some people traveling to an ESHIP summit. But that's a really interesting notion. We also, Enoch and I, at the Tom Tom Festival, probably in some some of those, side room conversation things, talked about what it would be like if ecosystem building was like a TomTom festival or a South by Southwest, where there are certain tracks, and maybe SEN had a day of track events, and NBIA had a day where they curated some conference stuff, and it would be like a whole festival of ecosystem building, but then each group would have its own day or segments or whatever to curate. So that's also an interesting notion.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We're all kind of making it up as we go along. So.
And I'll actually be at TomTom this year. So.
Oh, you will.
Yes.
Okay. So
it's only about 2 hours up the road.
Okay. I will have to introduce you to my friend Erin, who's going to be there. So what else do you have that you were thinking about, Eric, on this stuff?
Well, let's see. Dia, do you have anything to, what is it that brought you to this, that made you express an interest in this call?
Yeah, Celia knows this. We started a summit in Ada, Oklahoma, where we talked about ecosystem building, and really this was kind of before I was even involved with ESHIP as much, but that's kind of where I saw the importance of the collaborative culture, because just having that conversation with people around the room helped a lot just in person. So I was really intrigued towards the regional sub-ecosystem convenings. Like Meredith, you mentioned, I think, live broadcasting, sending out notes, sending all that is great. They're all resources, but the networking and the energy and the collaboration that happens at the moment in the room is kind of, I think that is significant. So I definitely think supporting sub convenings would be something that'll kind of make it more accessible to different regions, to custom it towards their needs, and kind of emphasizing on the sub ecosystem aspect of it.
I think Eric's trying to type quickly.
I'm doing a little, I'm sorry, yeah, and you can probably hear you can hear how badly I type. I'm like, I've got maybe 4 to 6 fingers that I use when I'm typing, depending on the kind of keyboard. So I'm sorry to,
No,
I'm going to be vulnerable for a second and say that I can't really type.
Well, it's hard to listen and type at the same time. But this is my first call for collaborative culture, and I'd be interested to just learn about what has the progress been on several of the projects and kind of where we are.
So I will address that. So a couple of things that we've discovered. The hackathon at the ESHIP Summit was basically a great exercise in trying to get people working together and ideating together. Prior to the ESHIP Summit last year, the ESHIP champions individually had worked on some of the canvases and also had done so. People had proposed and created canvases. So there were a whole bunch of different canvases. We tried to create a uniform canvas so everybody was answering the same questions and using the same format, so it was much easier. And then at the summit, we invited people to kind of go along and ideate on something, and then after the summit, be able to have the opportunity to follow up and keep convening. Obviously, the challenge around funding, community inspired grant making is something that's relatively unknown. I don't know that very many foundations are even open to it. The Kauffman Foundation is entertaining it, but it's a lot harder on the foundation side to think about what community-inspired grant making looks like, right? But Andy is working diligently as we speak on what the heck that looks like. And then, people were doing this on a voluntary basis or as a notion of something that they wanted to do. And some projects like Ecosystem Builder Hub, so EB Hub was something that could be action and take off, right? Yuval's Keystone podcast, kind of took off. Some of the other initiatives take a lot more collaboration. You cannot build 4.6 on your own. That's an ecosystem. That's a national resource provider network. It takes national resource providers to come together and help create that network. It's not like if you're not a national resource provider, it's very hard for you to corral other national resource providers. So that's really difficult. And everything, as we well know, moves at the speed of trust, right? Collaboration moves at the speed of trust. So while there's a lot of trust that we've all shared because we've had those shared experiences, it's challenging. And so as of right after the last summit, when we said, well, here's the information, here's the list of people who signed up, go forth and collaborate. And then there's varying degrees. So if you go on the beta dashboard under project teams and you pull that down, there's a couple of project canvases that have been shared, right? Goal 4 has one, goal 1 has one, some of them were ones that we did on the calls. So they're varying degrees. What we're working on is the instrument, and one of the things that we'll be working on around ESHIP champions is how to facilitate mass collaboration. And so what we didn't have, which we now have, is maybe a set of guidelines and principles that really actually work very well, called strategic doing. So if you've read the strategic doing book about agile leadership and getting people together and coming up with ways to collaborate, I would strongly recommend it. It's something that we're going to work on and bring some people together to train in facilitation of that method, so that at the next ESHIP summit, we're going to, work on trying to share that knowledge a little bit further out. So it's all in the works. Nothing is set in stone, but that's the notion that we've realized, just like when we emerged on ecosystem building a year and a half ago, and the Kauffman Foundation brought myself and Christine along, realizing that mass collaboration, grassroots ecosystem building, all of that stuff requires some kind of scaffolding. It's not structure. It's not like an institution, solid. It needs to be squishy and flexible, but you need people that will kind of hold up things and go, hey, let's build inside this. So just like Christine and I have been helping with the foundation and the community in support of, ESHIP champions are like the next layer out. The ESHIP community at large is also a layer out. And then as we expand those structural areas, then we'll get other people. I don't know. That's I think the hope. So while Meredith is working in her custom and bespoke way in her community and helping to put some framework around that with your collaborative culture, right? You help build the culture and bake it in. Dia does that in Ada. Hassan is now expanding past Detroit, and so is Eric. And so we're creating a little bit more scaffolding for everybody. So a really long way to answer your question.
I'll mention. I'll say two things. Well, we'll see where I go, and Cecilia can shut me out wherever she wants. She's got those buttons. So two things. I was trying to remember what the 3 legs of the stool are, but the other came up with 2 when I was thinking about this a few seconds ago. So there's sort of maybe two different approaches that I see happening on these calls, but most calls seem to lean into one thing or another. And the ones that are coming to mind for me at the moment are, there's the kind of the project focus. So there are calls that are really focused on, say, well, storytelling is not a goal, but it contributes to goals and overlays them. There are some goal groups that really are focused on projects. And to the extent that there's an ongoing project that folks can check in on, that gives some kind of structure. It also gives that feeling of momentum. There's a lot of other things that are other good qualities that come with that. So that's one piece. A different version is, and I'd say that even though there's some project related work that's happening with Goal 5, Goal 5 is one of two other goals that I spend some time on. A lot of that is really sort of more educating callers about, or participants on, what different people are doing around how they measure the activities in an ecosystem. So that's kind of the education piece. And oftentimes I think of it as almost like a meetup where you have a presenter, you have a Q&A, and if you've got great presenters, that can actually get a lot of folks on board and help educate folks. So one of the questions I think we're grappling with here is to what extent we want to focus on project work versus more general education. So that's, I'll put that, not necessarily in a parking lot, I've just put that into our agenda or meeting notes. The thing, since it's come up a couple times on this call, one of the projects I think a lot of folks are very interested in, but has some what I'd call sort of unique challenges, is this regional ESHIP piece. So, and I'll just focus on the challenges for a moment. So because ESHIP is a big event that was done by the Kaufman Foundation. So there's some brand equity in that. And to what extent Kaufman Foundation is interested or allows other people to use that brand, that's kind of a question. So the responses have been on a wide range, from something that's really pretty open source, like the ESHIP in a box. You've got 5 or 6 components, and you can put together a day from them, and it's an erector set, right? But that would still need to have some approval, from Kaufman Foundation if it's going under this kind of the ESHIP brand. What's essential? A difference, on the other end of the spectrum, there's, building a vehicle where we test a regional ESHIP sort of agenda and structure, an event that gets produced in a few different places around the country. We see what that looks like, and then we learn from that and create more of a, here's the playbook for doing an ESHIP in your region. Both of those sort of arrive at the same place. They're different tactics or strategies to get there. But one of the key pieces, I think, is that unlike most other goals, there's an owner that we need to figure out, do they have a preference of one way or another? And we haven't yet, I think, formulated the right question to kind of get a decision on that. But I do think that if we're interested in focusing on that a bit more, one of the things we can think about as ESHIP comes up is, what can we do at ESHIP to maybe learn about how people are working with this ESHIP event, and that we can bring back and feed back into some kind of a toolkit. But that's my, now I'll shut up.
So when you said that, Eric, one thing I was thinking about, and I guess this is like a possibility to think about. So there are convenings or summits that happen around the country already, that are somewhat connected to the space, but the focus is probably something totally different, but whose audience could potentially benefit from the stuff that happens at the ESHIP Summit. So maybe even building out, whether it's a ESHIP in a box, or having those regional convenings be part of an already existing larger convening, which would open up that audience to ecosystem building and the things that happen at ESHIP, and would also allow people from that region who can't make it to the full summit in Kansas City to attend that convening on a smaller scale. So it wouldn't be it wouldn't be a regional ESHIP all on its own. It would be embedded within something else which is somewhat aligned to what we're doing or related, but that has enough of name recognition and I guess name recognition and trying to think of the word, something that I guess that Kaufman would feel comfortable enough connecting ESHIP to because of that larger organization which is holding the convening.
I actually like that idea because I think it still provides room for a bit of flexibility, because when we talk about collaborative culture, and to some point, if we're trying to make it too structured, then it kind of beats the point of being organic and fluid. So I kind of like that idea of, because Kaufman's brand is important sometimes to get that attraction and get those people involved. But at the same time, it's not just a convening or a conference of its own, but it's tagging team with a larger, more regional, local event.
Right, so it could even be so some of the national resource providers that Kaufman is already connected with, who may have their own convenings or conferences. They already have relationships with Kaufman.
Yeah, that's a question above my pay grade for sure. So so it would be a question to put out there. That would be an interesting notion, because I don't, I mean, this is the next thing that's been promised, right? So a couple of years ago when they said, okay, so we said discover, design, and deliver, we will do one more afterwards, and then I don't know. So
it may be interesting to look into the background or history of 1 million cups and how that kind of started. And you all may know about this, but I don't. But it seems like it could be a little similar to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, 1 million cups started in the Kaufman cafeteria, right? A couple of people got together, and it was basically just a convening, had no funding involved, no, and some people might have thought, talking to Cameron, maybe some people showed up because they thought that they would get some investment, and then they quickly found out that, oh, so this is just actually convening. Okay. And trying to share that value, right? So
because we're kind of having that conversation right now where we realize that we don't have density enough in our small community to have 4 speakers a month or even 2 speakers a month. However, we have smaller communities surrounding us, and if we could get together and have a regional 1 million cups, it would make sense for us. But then at the same time, we don't know if we can do that with the rules of the Kaufman Foundation. But at the same time, we are inclined towards it because the branding of it helps, and the toolkit that they provide is it's awesome. So
that's great. So have you talked to Kim and Dee about it? Yeah.
I am waiting to connect to her. We've exchanged emails and trying to schedule a call.
Good. That's exciting.
Yes. Who was the other person you mentioned other than Kim?
Dee, Hamill, and Brianna are the ones that take care of it up front. So I think, but Kim Lane is definitely the person because you're in her region. So that would make sense.
I feel like this kind of, you were talking about that you're a community of 16,000 people or so. And I mean, I think it also brings up the notion of what do we mean by regional? And, for us, regional is anybody within an hour and a half drive time. Like we've recently received a grant to serve as the backbone organization coordinating innovation and entrepreneurship activities in what's defined as Go Virginia Region 2, which is Blacksburg, Roanoke, Lynchburg, and it'll take a good 2 hours to go from end to end of it. And that's a variety of communities that are in the 100,000 range, and others that are more like, you know, Christiansburg, where I live, is 25,000, Blacksburg's 46,000. And so, you know, when we talk about regional and we talk about, you know, the opposite of scaling, the customization, as we talk about regional summits, do we mean regional in the sense of a couple of states instead of national, or do we mean some sort of a ESHIP in a box where you could actually customize it down to one part of a state or even one city coordinating activities?
And I think I don't think there was a single consensus on that. So what I think, so for instance, there are some places that are pretty well connected or have large population centers fairly close by.
Right.
Being out here in the Southwest, you know, the next large community is probably about 3.5 hours away. But we want to have Las Cruces involved. We want to visit there. So it's one of those questions that partial, and I think just in terms of testing it, or just even thinking about it, we need to find a way to include both, you know, rural versus more urban, more dense. I will say, so this, one thing that I'm liking about this conversation is it's getting to something that I consider more like a, what's the minimum viable regional ESHIP? So, and I think when the two ones that I've mentioned already, they were kind of looking at a package that, you know, in some ways seemed pretty robust. Like, you know, it has to be like a day or whatever, it's inviting all these people. You know, the idea that this might be, maybe it's 3 hours during something else that already exists, I think that gives us, that lets us maybe free ourselves up a little bit more and experiment and maybe offer something that is a, you know, you don't have to spend $1 million. Not that anyone's offering $1 million, but you don't have to spend $1 million to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
So I like where we're going with this conversation.
So I want to be mindful of time as we go forward. Have we talked about where we want to go in this call? Does this mean that maybe in the next call, we really actually tackle the canvas? But keeping in mind that tackling the canvas for a regional ESHIP summit may mean taking the word ESHIP out of it and talking about it as a regional ecosystem building summit. So what would that look like? And if that's an interesting project, that would be something that might be a good next call to do. Another thing would be, you know, are there any other speakers or people that we can invite that talk about cultures of collaboration? May have a couple. I've just been handed a lot of information on network weavers. Is anyone familiar with June Holly? So June Holly has this organization called Network Weavers, and it's really probably a lot of collaborative culture. And Andy's about to send me some 300-page book to look at, you know, around that. And he's like, oh, well, here's like the first 60 pages. Happy reading. But then June and I have been conversing. So maybe it's talking to somebody who does that. Maybe it's talking to Sarah, not, you know, formally, well, Avery was in conveners, but maybe we'll tap into Sarah Sterling, who's the new executive director of conveners, and talk about how you do convening in a group. That's an interesting notion or subject. Who else? I don't know.
And I've got not necessarily, but maybe this would work really well for next month. So Callie with Wellington Experience is part of helping design and shape these ESHIP conferences or ESHIP summits so far. She said that I'd asked her about participating in this call at some point. It feels like that might be kind of a good touchstone because, I mean, they do a lot of things very, very well. But I think we can find a topic that, you know, it's an exclusive to that, because I think it would be nice to hear a little bit about more of what they do. But she's also, like I say, been a significant participant in helping design the ESHIP summits.
Mhm.
If folks are interested, I could try and get her on the hook for next month.
Yeah, I think Kelly's a great person to speak to, and she does other convenings besides the ESHIP Summit.
Mm.
So there's a wonderful book called The Art of Convening, The Art of Gathering, The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. So talking about getting people together, and that's an interesting notion on collaboration, how sometimes you're exclusive to be inclusive or focused on things. So it's a very interesting read. Anybody who's interested in specific project work, because the Goal 3 call is actually a project team now on creating a mission and vision. And it's an open invitation to anybody who wants to help figure out what a mission and vision of ecosystem building is about. So any other things, Eric, Dia, Merida?
Well, I'll mention, I'm not sure if this is a project, but I like the idea, if it feeds in well, I like the idea of discussing how different places around the country can help convince folks to attend ESHIP in a significant way. I know both Philly and Albuquerque did something around what I think is probably fairly similar around, say, South by Southwest, where we got all the folks who were potentially interested, maybe some porters, people who were attending, got those folks together so that we all knew who each other were. We knew something about what we wanted to achieve, and it helped, I think, build both support locally, but also a sense of a collegial sense for the folks who went. So I think that would be a fun thing to maybe work on, especially if that's the direction we might end up going.
I think this may be a crazy idea, but maybe having a panel before or after in our respective communities of some people who actually attended the conference, just talking about it to a larger group, and maybe with pictures, videos, some of the live broadcasts that we had, just to kind of get that energy in the room. And maybe for next year, we're preparing them for next time to actually come along with us.
Meredith, you're deep in thought. I feel like you have something really relevant to say.
I'm just trying to think through. So I mentioned that we've been awarded this grant. And one of the deliverables out of the grant is to do a regional entrepreneurship focused summit every year for at least our little part of the region. And so I'm just trying to think through, what does that end up looking like for us, and how it might be able to fit into some of these conversations that we're talking about, whether it is, as Dia was just talking about, a panel afterwards that's kind of because the timing is looking like it'll be either like a June, July, August timeframe for the first one. And so, if it is, I'm hoping to utilize some of that energy that I always come back from ESHIP with to really move it forward. And so that's just where my head is thinking about how a panel or something, or, some sort of a take back and continue doing could fit in. So it was kind of a selfish, deep in thought.
No, not at all. I think that each community could definitely get something out of that. And maybe it's inviting them to the goal calls or something like that. That's something that we continue to do. And what we're trying to move from is a wide community to something a little more focused, right? So it becomes like a community of practice, and then how we get all the people on these calls to be more innovative and create with each other. So I think you're on to something. I don't think it's something that's, I like the after parties. Everybody wants to go to the after party anyway, don't they? So let's think about that. That'll be good. So what's your next steps, Eric? And what do you think?
let's see. What are the next steps? So I think I'm grappling with that. I think there's a couple of quick action items, but I think if we want to focus, sounds like there's a consensus around focusing on this on the regional ESHIP or the regional ecosystem builder events. Boy, I mean, I think I'll just say that I'm torn between two different approaches. One is there's like maybe 3 different write-ups of what this looks like in the past. I'm wondering if folks want to review those. On the other hand, I'm also thinking, you know, the folks that you all have, or the impressions that you all have of previous ESHIPs are really, really good. So I don't know that we need to kind of go back through them. I'll just say I'm torn.
I think that the thing before you create the thing is maybe looking a little deeper, right? So going back to the prime the prime description of this call is how do we create collaborative culture, right? Mm-hmm. Collaborative culture in an ESHIP summit is more or less an output, as opposed to the things that we need to bake in so that people can come together to be collaborative. Like, what is it that we're looking for? Is it the win-wins for people? Is it how we support each other, how we advocate, how we create that culture so that people can feel like they're collaborating? Because I think that that's the challenge, and all of you know it, have experienced it. It's the thing that frustrates you, that you wish people didn't do, and maybe it's delving into why people come to community like that. Like, what, heck, who doesn't want to create a regional ESHIP summit, right? And then you think, well, it's not maybe that they don't want to, that maybe it's the trust thing, maybe it's the who benefits thing, and so going back to the bare roots of what it is to be collaborative, and why can't we get there? And that's a really deep discussion.
And I'll mention one thing that I think has been a bit of a challenge when we talk about this, or when there's different ideas, is that oftentimes it's more of like a entrepreneurial ecosystem, sort of an expo, and it's sort of like a lot of one-to-manys and not necessarily about a lot of collaboration or working together. So I think it does, a lot of some of these other versions kind of miss this key point, that it's like, if it's not helping with building this collaborative culture, then you know, it probably shouldn't be what we're looking for with this.
It needs to be hard work. It needs to be not something where you can come and there's a speaker up there and then suddenly, you know, I am on Slack. I just don't check it very often. Sorry. as I see the little message pop up at the bottom. But, you know, I feel like a lot of conferences you go to, and this was what I was talking about earlier of you know, the idea of live streaming it somewhere, or a traditional conference approach where there is this speaker up at the front and the mini, and it's not this collaborative work. And so anytime that we can try to prioritize the collaboration and the engagement and the hard work, I feel like that becomes a more rewarding experience for folks than go and listen to somebody else telling you what to do.
And and a lot of the times, Meredith, in my experience, they tell you what they did doesn't help you figure out what to do, right?
Right.
I mean, those are the panels where they're just kind of dialing it in, and I've walked out of several of those. I think I walked out of one at the Global Agripreneur Entrepreneurship Conference, because the guy started telling us what he's not going to talk about, but then talked about all the things that he's not going to talk about by talking about those things. And you're like, okay, you just did that. I'm not that impressed. So. All right. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and I've done way more talking than I normally should on these calls. But thank you, because now I think you're helping me tackle my next challenge, which is how to respond back to this person who's trying to take over the panel I'm moderating. So, and and the importance of being collaborative. Damn it! So thank you. I hope we have been supportive of each other just as much as you have all supported me, and now I'm going to write a much firmer email than I was going to. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think intentional collaboration is what we all should be looking at. So
excellent. All right. So I would probably, think about what you want to talk about next, and let's get moving. We got a lot to do.
Sounds good.
Right.
I'm going to send a quick thing in through Slack, Meredith. I'm not sure if I've got your email, although I can find it if we have trouble, but I'm going to send something pretty quick. I've got a call right after this, but I'll send it later this afternoon.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'm in most of the groups, so.
Excellent.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Yay. Have
Thanks
a
very much.
wonderful week. Thank you so much.
thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.